The key to last week in NFL DFS is trying to be different without being dumb. And I think that's the key for most weeks in DFS. For week 7, you want to be different, but I'm not sure we can avoid being dumb based on the options at our disposal for this week. It's a tough one for sure. Not a lot of game stacks I feel great about. I think that the best games in the slate have pretty obvious paths to failure. There aren't a lot of good alternatives, so it's a dicey slate. It's dicey for everyone, though, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. We're going to break things down, let you know what we're seeing here and how we're analyzing this slate for NFL DFS. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the senior managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, week 7 is coming in hot. I am feeling uneasy about this slate. How are you today?
I'm good. I feel like we're going to complain a lot, though, on this show about how,
I'm not going to complain because it's like everyone's dealing with it. So I can't complain. I'm just letting people know that, like, there are paths to failure.
Yeah, and we're going to be like, or at least I know myself. I'm going to be like, well, here's why I don't like Lamar Jackson as much as I should. Like, I'm going to find ways to get upset about, like, the best plays still. So it's kind of a warning for everyone that it's going to be a little. I guess I'm always that way.
I wouldn't say that because people hit stop, but like what I would say is more so like
if people really hit stop after that, then this must be their first time they've ever listened to this show.
Yes, you listener, dear listener, for the first time, I value you. Brandon may not, but I do. I love you, and thank you for listening. We appreciate all of you and your listens over here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. I would say more so it's like what I want to do today is explain why the paths to failure exist and whether those paths to failure are enough for us to deviate from the games that in theory should be the best ones of this week. That's my goal this week.
Yeah, I think one of the questions that we'll have to ask a lot and really figure out is, okay, do we force stacks that we don't love? Mm-hmm. Or do we just try to play the quote unquote best plays from multiple games, have a lot less correlation in our lineups? You know, that can work. Mm-hmm. You do lose a little bit of an edge. Mm-hmm. Stacking is a proven method long term. It's not guaranteed by any means. You can still get it wrong, but I think it's going to be that, like, okay, you're building a main lineup that everything else splits off of. If you're that type of lineup builder, I mean, some people might just build 150 and not really have a main lineup. But if I'm building a main lineup, it's like, I want to play Lamar if I can do it, which I probably can. Am I forcing in stacks with that? I can't really force Lamar and Mark Andrews together. So, like, how much do I deviate from the what our status quo is? I think is right. Like the main thing I got to answer this week.
And I think the one thing that to me is reassuring there is that we did this a lot last year where we had to kind of tweak our overall baseline approach and account for suboptimal situations. I think I'll be tapping back into that this week and like doing research in the off season, having had those slates. I feel better about that now than I did last year. It's less uncomfortable for me than it was. So I think I can navigate around it. We'll break it down and let you know where we are turning for this week. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. The NBA is back, which means that Tom Vecchio has you covered every weekday with the Daily ISO that is up every weekday morning on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. I'll have NASCAR for Homestead coming up tomorrow. We've got PGA still. We've got UFC still, all right here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. So go hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. As mentioned, NBA season is back, and it's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in free bets if your first bet does not win. FanDuel has all your favorite bets, from the money line to point spreads to player props. You can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. Plus, with live betting, You'll get updated odds even after the games have already started. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use, so download FanDuel today to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Make every moment more this season with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. Refund issued as non-withdrawable free bets that expire 14 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Kansas, 1-800-522-4700 or ksgamblinghelp.com. Louisiana, 1-877-770-STOP. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Tennessee, call the red line at 1-800-889-979. In Wyoming, 1-800-522-4700 or in West Virginia, 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Now, we did touch on the slate overview earlier on in a bit of where we're feeling about this slate, but Brandon, when you sit down and look at this slate, what are the key things that stand out to you for week 7?
Figuring out what I'm doing with the top 2 tight ends, because we want to play them. We talked about this on Monday. They might be sort of salaried out, up over 8,000. Kelsey's 83, Andrews 85. Nobody else above 66. I believe it's like tight end day on Sunday, like National Tight End Day.
Is it again?
I think that's coming up.
I am not ready for those tweets again. That was the worst.
So, it would make sense on tight end day, but also with their market shares and everything that those guys put up big games. But
counterpoint, if it's tight end day, that would imply that more tight ends do well, which means we can go away from them.
It definitely could do that.
Because you know who else is a tight end? People not named Mark and Travis. There are other people who play tight end.
Oh, that's like we're just a Tom away from Blink-182.
What? I don't
Tom and
understand.
Travis.
Okay, I don't know. Whatever. I don't
Come
know what
on,
that is.
man. We're like the same age. That should be a.
I didn't listen to. I don't know the names of musicians.
That's
What
the
do you
only
expect
band.
from
That's
me?
the only band I could do that with.
Tom Tremble.
Yeah.
We'll get his 3 snaps. That'll work out. Eric Tomlinson. We could do that. Tommy
Maybe.
Hudson. Oh, I miss him. Bless his soul.
Maybe I go. Well,
Is Tommy Hudson related to Tanner Hudson? I don't know. Whatever. Proceed.
I was gonna say maybe I'll just play like a Tom Brady and then Mark. And
Don't. No.
Mark
Tinder
and
Tom is out of
Travis.
play for DFS.
Maybe I'll flex a tight end.
Okay, I'm revoking the reins for you from Slate Overview. For me, I think the key thing that defines a slate is the lack of viable value at running back, because it really does force us into, I think at least, spending all 3 or 2 running back slots, but probably 3, all 3 running back slots having salaries of $73 or higher, because the fall off after Kenneth Walker III, unless you want to talk yourself into Aaron Jones, is massive. Like, so if we look at running backs in their most relevant samples, guys who have a salary of $7,300 or higher, in that range, there are 12 running backs, 13 running backs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them have averaged 100 or more yards from scrimmage per game in their most relevant sample. Nobody below 73 is above 88.7 in their most relevant sample. So it's a big fall off. So maybe you can talk yourself into Aaron Jones. I can't right now. Maybe you can. I can't.
I'm more likely to play Zeke than Aaron Jones.
I'm not. You can do that. He's like 20 yards per game lower than Aaron Jones. And he's a higher salary. What? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
no.
One of these games we love. One of these games we want to.
I don't care. One of these players I love. One of these players I'd rather get stabbed in the eye than use.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's just play our favorite players and disregard the game environment.
I will.
Like we always.
I'm using Gino this week. I will do exactly that. What are you talking about? Anyway.
Could you imagine having tuned out after I said we were going to complain?
I am so offended that you would
Blink
recommend
182
Zeke.
thing, Jim
Can we do
Count,
Zeke over
Jim
Aaron
Count
Jones?
10.
Give me Aaron Jones over Zeke as a bet right now. Do it. Write it down. Do it.
I'll do that.
Do it. Okay. How dare you?
FanDuel points.
How dare you? Okay. But I think that's the key thing this week is I need 3 running backs, maybe 2, but probably 3, at $73 or higher this week. I can pepper that range. Like, love Kenneth Walker, 73. I like Joe Mixon, 74. Love Breece Hall, 76. Damon Pierce is great. DeAndre Swift is kind of interesting. All those guys in the 7,000 range. Maybe it's all 3 in that 7,000 range, but I can't get a lot lower than that. So to me, that does funnel me into one specific kind of build that I kind of have to adhere to when I'm thinking about quarterback, tight end, and receiver.
Yeah, it's pretty restrictive in that sense. You could probably like make a weak-ish case for someone down in the lower 6,000 range, but I don't like. You could say like, okay, I like
Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, he was the
stupid role.
Like, we saw him be scripted out last week when they were trailing. There's a chance they trail again. He might have a bad role, but you could say like they're just going to try to run it on Kansas City, and he's tied to a game that we like. I know, like, preemptively Jim's going to freak out, but like if Melvin Gordon actually is considered like like he's 63, the wins up in that game, like he could have a big role. You got to really like extrapolate, but that's kind of it with those 2 guys, unless you just say, hey, AJ Dillon is just Aaron Jones at 5,700, which he might be. Yeah. But then you're doing a whole lot of like, you're kind of handcuffing yourself in terms of sheer upside, I think.
AJ Dillon is actually closer to Zeke than Aaron Jones is, than Aaron Jones. AJ Dillon is closer to Zeke. I don't know the right phrases. Anyway, whatever. Leave me here. Leave me behind. Yeah, I can't talk myself into anyone down there. And I think if I have to talk myself into someone, that probably means I shouldn't use them. I think that Jones is the closest, but he's still 68. So no value at running back this week. As of now, that could change. It could change.
Yeah, it sure could. Deion Jackson last week. But yeah, like you're going to have to talk yourself into guys at most positions. You should do that less at running back and quarterback because those are volume driven positions. And if you're questioning the volume, it's probably a negative EV play long term. You're going to have to like talk yourself into receivers and tight ends, but that's more volatile anyway. So it's more doable.
Yep. So that'll be a key thread for us throughout the podcast for today. Let's dive in now to injuries here for week number 7. Russell Wilson limited in practice. Mr. Unlimited is limited. Weird. Limited in practice Wednesday with a hamstring injury. It initially sounded like he was going to miss a lot of time, but a limited practice gives him at least a shot of suiting up here. Melvin Gordon was a full participant and apparently will start, but don't care. Not going to do it. Wilson banged up if he plays. So how do you view the Broncos offense against the Jets with Russell Wilson not at full health?
Whatever happened to the nano bubbles?
Yeah, do nano bubbles help hamstrings or just head injuries?
I don't know. I thought like he joked that he had like Wolverine blood, but
did he say that?
Yeah.
That's deeply upsetting.
I mean, look, I don't know. I'm just here to ask questions, but like, if you have the nano bubbles, why do you need Wolverine blood? Or if you have both, like maybe that's do
the nano bubbles give you Wolverine blood?
Well, maybe it cancels each other out. Like,
would Hugh Jackman be better quarterback for the Broncos right now than Russell Wilson? You can say no. It's okay. I feel like the knuckle things would or whatever they're called. The knuckle things would break the football, and that seems suboptimal. Wow, Deflategate Part 2, Wolverine melting all the footballs.
All right, to bring this back to the serious conversation, Russ is kind of he started to look a little bit better, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was like a statue in the pocket to start the year. He would not look to run. He would not run. They didn't want him to run. Now there's a little bit more of that old school Russell Wilson, he's gonna do a Patrick Mahomes sort of thing, which is probably unfair to Russ that we're calling it a Mahomes, but scrambling and then throwing some weird sidearm, underarm thing. But if it's a hamstring, that is probably going to go away. again, and we might be looking more at like early season Russ where there's no threat of mobility and they could just bracket the receivers again, and that's an issue. The wind is also up, say about 16 miles an hour for this game. That's going to like make this a more horizontal game. I'm kind of out. The Jets also having a lot of 300-yard passer, if my data is right, but it's not like a stat I usually look at. But I think I'm kind of out on this one.
Yeah, the defense is pretty good. I think especially relative to expectations. I think the biggest question is, do you downgrade the Broncos so much that you can't use Greg Dulcich at minimum salary? Because Dulcich played a lot of snaps in his debut, ran a lot of routes, didn't get a ton of targets, had just 3 there, but like got some high leverage looks. He had a downfield target, had another end zone target that he didn't catch. I'm still willing to consider Dulcich if Russ plays. If Russ doesn't play, probably not. But if Russ plays, I'll consider Dulcich. I won't feel like tremendous about it, but I would probably use him. What would your read be on Dulcich if Russ does play, but we know he's not fully healthy?
Yeah, so at minimum salary, it's not as important. Like I'm not trying to write off like that we need a whole lot of potential or certainty, but with that minimum salary, you can get away with like 9 points and feel pretty good because it's going to unlock your ability to get access to higher upside guys. And again, realistically, outside of Andrews and Kelsey, not a whole lot of tight ends project for 15 points like safely. So
yeah,
I think you could do it. Dulcich also just deserves a lot of credit for, I think, the best headshot per dollar on FanDuel that you could really have.
Also just good vibes.
Yeah.
He's a weird dude in a good way. I think, I don't know, maybe it's not, I don't know. Seems fun. So that does matter. The vibes are good there. Maybe that improves the vibes of the entire team because they're really bad right now. But if Russ goes, I'll use Dulcich. If not, I probably won't with Brett Rippon. Dak Prescott has been cleared to return for the Cowboys. He got into full practice on Wednesday. Dak back, that good. We'll talk about them in the Bookmaker section. Jonathan Taylor got in a limited session on Wednesday. He has missed the past 2 games. Both Deion Jackson and Nyheim Hines were full. So Taylor practiced Thursday, Friday last week, but then still sat. Gets in a limited session this week. How do you feel about JT if we assume he does play against Titans?
Was he limited to end last week?
Yeah, both days. Yep.
Okay. Look, like this is not a hot take thing, but I think that if Taylor is still limited this far removed from his injury, they almost made it sound like he wasn't even going to miss time, and now he's been out, still limited. So it's probably a more significant injury. I mean, it seems significant and they downplayed it, but now it seems like it was actually significant all along. And I think it's fair at this point to wonder if, based on what Deion Jackson did with Nyheim Hines full, even if Taylor plays, if he's going to be if they're going to give him a full workload.
Yeah.
That's not I know people love to do it with Tony Pollard and Zeke, just give, these other guys more opportunities, but they might not have to give Jonathan Taylor his full workload.
Right.
And I think within this offense, if he's not getting a full workload, I have enough question marks where I'm probably out. I did like him last week, assuming that he would come back with a full workload, kind of under salary. The salary is the same, just with all of this added context now with Hines, because I thought JT might be JT plus without Hines.
Yeah.
And then we didn't even get either of them. Yeah. And so now there's 2 guys who can take some work. I think I'd be out.
I think that's where I'm at too. The one thing that would change it is if he were to get in a full practice Friday and be removed from the injury report. That would change things for me pretty drastically, but I don't think we'll get there based on what we've seen so far, personally. Despite having a bye, the Lions are still super banged up. No DJ Chark and no Josh Reynolds at practice on Wednesday. Amon-Ra St. Brown was full. DeAndre Swift limited. We'll talk about them in the Bookmaker section. Keenan Allen got in a limited practice Wednesday with his hamstring injury. The Chargers, though, have a week 8 bye, and Allen said he could sit again to gain the extra rest. So despite being back again, I'm not totally convinced he plays. Josh Palmer's in concussion protocol. He didn't practice Wednesday. I think, but based on the fact that he played the rest of that game and then is in concussion protocol, I think he's probably going to sit. We'll talk about the Chargers in the Bookmaker section. Trent Williams returned to practice Wednesday with his high ankle sprain. He has missed the past 3 games. We'll talk about them in the Bookmaker section as well. Darren Waller missed practice Wednesday due to a hamstring injury. How many hamstrings? Let's control F hamstring. 3. Okay, that's a lot less than I thought it was going to be. Anyway, hamstring injury for Darren Waller. Got hurt in week 5 and apparently is not fully healed despite the bye. Foster Moreau is limited in practice. He's missed the past couple of games. How would you view Moreau if Waller were to sit in this one?
So he had a stint last year with some fantasy relevance, and I know we talked about him a good bit. He's also been somewhat involved already this year. 50% of the snaps in the games that he's actually played. 2.7 targets per game. I think he went 4-4-0 if that adds up. But he hasn't been this is different than, let's say, I don't know. I guess I don't have a great example off the top of my head of a number 1 tight end goes out and we're we don't know. Maybe the Broncos from this past week, no one knew for certain how tight end was going to shake out. There were some, it wasn't. So we've seen this from Moreau, so it's not the same as just
right
trying to guess.
He has earned targets when Darren Waller's been active, and I think that's what matters to me.
Yeah, I should have just said that. Thank you.
So to me, I think that Moreau would be another option. And to me, I think that I've entered this year with the mindset of when I can, I should spend up at tight end because there's a legitimate edge there. I think this week is different, given that we actually do have viable plays. We know we'll get targets and play snaps at lower salaries. So Cade Otton at 49 is one of those guys. Cameron Brate missed practice Wednesday. I don't think he'll play after a neck injury for him this past week. Otton is 49. I'm intrigued by that. You mentioned Dalton Schultz. He is 48. He was a full practice Wednesday. I think that's a viable play as well. Moreau this week is at 46. I think that can work as well. And then mentioned Dulcich. So we actually have a lot of decent options at tight end at below 5,000. I think this week the edge in using them is better than usual is the way I'd phrase that.
Yes. Sorry, I was trying to do a 2v2. It's hard to even. So it'd be I know we're not we're a pro Eckler podcast, but we don't typically play him a lot. But you could play Eckler and Cade Otton, or Andrews and Jeff Wilson. I wouldn't even want to get back up to Eckler. So the value. I mean, I wouldn't hate it if I'm stacking that game, but you're gonna gain a lot of ability to roster more significant, which is obvious. But I think the confines that the two tight ends put on us this week, it's not just something I can write off.
I agree. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Hayden Hurst were all limited on Wednesday for the Bengals. That's an improvement for Higgins, who sat out last Wednesday. He did play last week, 10 targets, but I think as we saw with Gabe Davis, getting guys healthier while they're playing through injuries is important too. So Higgins practicing Wednesday is good for me, and we'll talk about him in the trend section. Panthers said that PJ Walker will start this week with Jacob Eason as the backup. They're facing the Bucks. Their implied total is 15. Might be too high. Can you get to Christian McCaffrey in such wretched conditions this week?
A good job on the pronunciation of Jacob Eason, by the way.
Yeah. In case you missed it, DJ Moore was asked about the quarterback situation and all this. And he's like, Baker, PJ, Sam, the other guy, and he forgot Jacob Eason's name. And the Panthers PR team tried to clarify it was because he forgot how to pronounce Jacob Eason. Jacob is a somewhat common name, I've heard. I feel bad for DJ Moore. That explanation did not fly.
Yeah. So for Tampa Bay's actually been kind of average against running backs. They haven't been the super clamped down matchup. So I'm not as worried.
Didn't practice again Wednesday, so that should probably continue.
So it's not just can't consider any running backs against the Bucs. It's not that. It's just still not a great situation where your implied team total is that low. McCaffrey's been awesome like it's kind of gone overlooked because there's just not a whole lot of touchdown equity in this offense, but you really can't ask for a whole lot more than what he's given us aside from the touchdowns. And you can't just say like, oh, it's touchdown regression. This team's not good enough to be in the red zone very often. So he's got to like do it himself, and that's not a really bankable situation. At this salary, I think he's just out for me. If he were 8,000, like with Taylor, I'd be like, I'll get there. But 87, even with maybe some salary to burn in a sense, I think I'm going to say that a few times throughout. It's like it's going to feel like we have a little bit more wiggle room because we can go down at quarterback, we can go down at tight end, we can go down at receiver. I still don't know if that's going to get me to McCaffrey as much as it is more mid-range running backs.
I agree. We can get like his workload, like you said, has been very good. And his production has been good. He's at 111.7 yards in scrimmage per game this year. And that's a very good number for $8,700. But Josh Jacobs right below him, $100 less, and has had better production for the full season, including the times before he became this like pass catching back too. So like his sample could be even better than what it is. DeAndre Swift has had a lot of yardage. He has touchdown concerns for a different reason. Damian Pierce, Brees, all these guys lower salaried. So I can get not McCaffrey-esque production, but like McCaffrey adjacent production for lower salaries on better teams, including the Jets. And I think that's why I'd agree with you where I probably won't get there for this week. Brandon Cooks sat due to a rest day on Wednesday. It was deemed rest, but Lovie Smith said it was a coach's decision. Kind of odd. Cook said he was good. Kind of weird vibes. I think he'll play, but worth noting he might not. We'll talk about them in the trends section. Yes, the Houston Texans in trends in the year 2022. First, though, let's dive into Bookmaker info for week number 7, starting off with the highest total on the board. That is in Los Angeles for the Chargers and the Seahawks. That's at 51.5. I took the under on this. So that tells you how I feel about the slate as a whole. Chargers favored by 6 in this game right now. I think Seattle can win. And that lends itself towards a close game, which is good. We want that. But the Chargers have been a frustrating offense. So do you think this game deserves to be viewed as the top game on the slate, or the way we typically view the top game on the slate? Or is it a trap?
Are you saying like, do I compare it to
like Bills Chiefs last week? How do you feel about this one compared to that? Or let's say like Seahawks Cardinals last week. Like we went in feeling pretty okay about that one. How do you feel about this compared to that?
Somewhat similar, but I believe in the Chargers more than I do in the Cardinals.
Why would that be?
I would like this one more if Keenan Allen played, but Keenan has made a personal vendetta to ruin my dynasty team. Mm-hmm. So
he's called you out and said, F that guy, not playing.
But I think relative to expectations overall and like who performed, I know Kenneth Walker had a good game, but like the receivers for the Seahawks didn't put up huge games by any means. So I think that it's safe to say both of these offenses underperformed collectively. I know that this is going to be a popular game still, but probably not as popular as it should have been because, or as it should be because of the results that we saw. But I think both quarterbacks are in play. This is definitely a 2 QB game for me. I think there's 3 receivers I can very easily make a case for. I think it's like 1.5 running backs, depending on whether I can get to Eckler in terms of salary. Possibly both tight ends. I know, like I asked about Noah Fant before the show, and you weren't intrigued, but he does have 5 and 7 targets the past 2 games. He's been a little bit more involved. And if we're talking about game stacks, again, it comes down to, would I rather play Cade Otton in a standalone situation or like Noah Fant in part of a game stack where I have Geno Smith or something like that?
No.
Okay.
Is Noah Fant the tight end 1 on his team, or is it Will Dissly? Because I think it's Will Dissly. Like I think it's Will Dissly. But anyway, I don't want Fant, but like I think it stunk last week with Metcalf.
58% of the routes last week, and Dissly was at 39%.
Yeah,
7 targets to 1.
Okay, what do you do with him?
45 yards.
Oh boy. That's exactly Cade Otton's stat line from week 5, but don't tell the people that. Don't let them know that I'm wrong. Let me be hypocritical. I think that the receivers in this game are phenomenal. Specifically Lockett and Metcalf. I'm guessing they will still be popular this week. I think that I think that's okay though, because I think that it'll be like if they would have been on 17% of rosters had they done well last week, I think they'll be on 13% this week. And my view of them didn't really change. Like stuff like that happens. So I think that they're both phenomenal plays. We got discounts on both them too. Salaries went down. DK is 69. Lockett 68. I shouldn't call him DK given this, but yeah. Metcalf went down to 69. Lockett down to 68. I think both those guys are phenomenal plays. I think they're both cash game considerations for me. And Mike Williams, if we get no Keenan Allen, would be the exact same. Obviously, last week was disappointing, but like Pat Surtain's good. I think we talked about that on the Monday show, previewing that game, where like I was a bit worried about Mike Williams because of that. So it's not like this came out of nowhere. And now Josh Palmer is banged up. So we could have no Keenan, no Josh Palmer. That's bad for the Chargers, but could be good for Mike Will. Mike Will in the games without Keenan, 21.8% target share. He's had double digits in 3 out of 5, getting a good amount of deep work. Even in that game against Surtain, still 3 deep targets there. He's had multiple deep targets in every game without Keenan. So I think he's 78, so it's a very high salary, but well worth that. And I'd want to go there.
What also helps, like if you're interested in Mike Williams, you're probably somewhat interested in like Geno Smith at quarterback, and that helps offset things a good bit.
Yeah. So we actually had people on YouTube talking about Geno. I think Geno is very in play. You said it's a 2 quarterback game. I couldn't agree more. I think that honestly, like I think Lamar is still going to be my top quarterback this week, but like I don't know if it's a full tier above Herbert and Geno. I think he is a full tier, but like I'm not fully convinced of it. So I think that Herbert is a great play. I think that Geno, like Herbert is probably the pay up to be contrarian kind of option this week. So I think that Geno, revenge game, by the way, again, will catch some popularity this week. And as a result of that, that might make Herbert the better play. I am very okay taking the discount on Geno. I think that does move the needle a lot this week. I think that's a great thing. So I'm not saying don't use Geno. I love Geno and will use him this week, but the appeal of spending it for Herbert to be contrarian is also pretty high.
It sure is. I think it's fair to wonder where we think Mahomes will factor in. I know we're about to talk about that game.
Yeah.
But he might be the contrarian guy because of the matchup.
True.
But I agree with you where Herbert's not going to be as popular as it should be. Everyone saw what happened Monday night, and that stuff sticks in our minds more than it should.
Where are you on Austin Eckler? Because I think that his role has gotten a lot better, and I am less out on him now than I was. For the full season now, 32% red zone share for Eckler. That is much better than it was. 29 adjusted opportunities per game, which is actually the best on the slate. Each guy's most relevant sample. The yardage, though, is still pretty underwhelming, and that bothers me at 95. So I think he's like a game stack consideration. And I say consideration to emphasize that he's not a lock for game stacks. And I think for a standalone play, I'm probably not going to get there. Where are you on him as his role has improved?
So he's going to be tied to a lot of my Geno Smith shares. And I hate saying that and doing that because then it's sort of dependent on, if Geno has a terrible game or if Eckler gets held in check, but Geno goes off, something like that. But with the salary restrictions that are kind of present throughout the lineup building process this week, I think I have to be okay with tying more players directly together and not straying from that, because I'm not going to play Eckler a lot outside of game stacks. I'm probably not going to play him maybe at all with Herbert, although I probably should consider that.
I don't mind pairing with Herbert. That's fine for me.
But starting that with Herbert and Eckler, then I got to spend down a lot of places.
Yeah.
And that feels too restrictive.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to have a lot. I'll have Eckler in Geno stacks, but probably not otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think other thing to think about here in terms of like combinations is I think that my favorite bring back for a Herbert team is Walker, or Kenneth Walker the third, I should say. Because like with Herbert, he's frustrating because they don't unleash him. Like they play this like idiot style, like low ADOT kind of offense, partly because of personnel, but also I think because Joe Lombardi thinks that Justin Herbert is late career Drew Brees as opposed to kind of a Patrick Mahomes alien type guy. If they get behind on the legs of Kenneth Walker III, that is how you could potentially get a Herbert ceiling game. So I think that my favorite bring back for a Herbert team is actually Walker versus a receiver. I still love Metcalf and I love Lockett as bring back options, but I think that Walker would probably be my 1A, whereas they're 1B and 1C this week.
I'm fine with it.
Okay. Let's move now to our second game here in the bookmaker section. That is the Chiefs at the 49ers. Chiefs are 2.5-point favorites. One of two games this week with a 48.5-point total. This game is in Santa Clara, I think it is. Anyway, it's the 49ers are the home team. I'll just phrase it that way. We've got big name pieces on both sides here. It has one elite defense in the 49ers and a lot of tough to trust pieces on both sides. How are you viewing this game for stacking?
It is very, very intriguing. I think the matchup will keep Patrick Mahomes less popular than he probably should be. We know that he can and does shred good defenses. A fair question, probably the main question in this game is less like, okay, do we think Mahomes has a decent game? Because he probably does. But it's more, do the 49ers do enough to make sure that Mahomes is throwing a lot? Do they even get ahead and have like that come from behind Mahomes just going off kind of game? And then that leads me to look at like their pass rate. Last week we saw the 49ers play from behind, so the passing volume was up, and that led to good games for the three top pass catchers. San Francisco so far this year, though, has a 53% pass rate. That's 25th in the NFL. When they're trailing by 7 or fewer, and if we remove 2-minute drills, they're at a 66% pass rate, though. Their pass rate over expectation is a plus 3.3 percentage points. So we're most likely assuming that they are trailing. That has shown like they have not been super run heavy when trailing, even in like narrow situations, like narrow leads. The thing is, they might want to keep it on the ground because you can run on the Chiefs. So we got to it's a lot of if-then statements in this game. But if the Chiefs get ahead and you play that angle, we could see some legitimate volume from three pretty solid. We know like Debo is an elite DFS asset when things are going well, but like Ayuk and Kittle are now borderline. If they're actually going to throw the ball, though, they're better than borderline. So I am intrigued specifically, I think, by Brandon Ayuk.
Why Ayuk specifically?
Because he fills receiver, and I need receivers in the low 6,000 range.
Yeah. If you look at the 4 games they played with Kittle, which means the 4 games that Garoppolo has started, it's a 27% target share for Debo, 22% for Ayuk, and 20% for Kittle. Kittle, 10 targets last week, kind of masking some underwhelming shares before then. He's up to 66, I believe, this week, which is a little high.
Yeah.
I get it, but it's a little bit high. Deep target shares are kind of irrelevant because they aren't throwing deep because Garoppolo is Garoppolo, and it's kind of keeping the Jimmy G way. Ayuk leads with 6 deep targets across those 4 games. It's a 29% share, but again, shares are kind of fluky there. In the red zone across those 4 games, we have 46% for Debo, target share, not red zone share overall, and then 23% for both Ayuk and Kittle. So good shares for Debo, and his salary is still forgiving at 77. So I don't mind that. I don't love anybody in this game. Like Kelsey's hard to get to from a salary perspective. I refuse to love a Chiefs receiver because I don't hate myself enough to do that. I like Debo. I'm okay with Ayuk, okay with Kittle. I just don't love anybody in this game overall, which makes it tougher for me to feel super itchy to pivot to it, I guess.
Yeah, but I do think that this is one of those games where, I know this is an afternoon game, same at 4:25, same as the Seattle and LA game. But this game is definitely not bad enough where you're like, I can't touch it. I can't consider stacking it. I think if you want to get different without being dumb, it's playing Mahomes, Ayuk, taking a chance on like an MVS bounce back, or like we saw a better usage. And honestly, we're not film guys, but seeing Juju run after the catch made me reconsider like, hey, maybe he can do this, like if he's given the opportunity. So like maybe it's not just him.
He just looked less checked out last week for some reason. Like that was the concern I had, is like that Vegas game. Like he just seemed like spacey. I don't know. It was weird. Like this is why I shouldn't watch games, like you were saying. Like I don't know. It kind of like I still used him in game stacks last week, but I wasn't enthusiastic about it.
Right. Like it's not this is just as good as Charger Seahawks, or it's so easy to pivot, but like it's justifiable. It's more justifiable than pivoting to these games with low totals, which I'll talk about in a bit.
Well, where are you at on the you mentioned Juju. How do you feel about the pass catchers here? Because I think that like if I have one Mahomes team, I'm probably going without a stack. Like I'd probably do like a Debo bring back, but I'd probably just do Mahomes with no pass catchers because it's so tough to get to Kelsey from a salary perspective. I don't feel great about MVS for obvious reasons. Juju's salary is a little bit high, and like I'm still questioning the upside a bit. So I'd probably go Mahomes by himself, but I don't really know for one lineup.
Given the state of receiver and having it be pretty like unappealing overall, I would rather play MVS, because if I'm believing that Mahomes does something,
true,
most likely MVS is part of that. He's the salary is $5,600. We know that he can get downfield work. We know that, as we say sometimes here and there, like it only takes one is really misleading, because one 40-yard touchdown catch isn't going to blow you away even at 5,600.
Yeah,
but he has had elevated volume in certain games. Didn't have it last week. I think he did have just the 3 targets and didn't catch any, but I think he had 1 or maybe even 2 where he was targeted, but there were penalties.
Yeah.
So it's probably not as bad as it.
He had a catch that got called back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I would just play MVS with Mahomes, because what else am I going to do?
I probably should too. He's shown some yardage upside this year too. So I got a very important comment over on YouTube from Lobby CDQ. Mariota just torched the 49ers defense. He did. And if the number 1 quarterback in football, Marcus Mariota, can do it, then Mahomes can too. So that's worth noting. Again, it's hard to compare anyone to the best quarterback in football, Marcus Mariota. But I think Mahomes is at least half a tier below Mariota, as opposed to most guys being several tiers below him. Let's move to our other game here in the Bookmaker section. That's the Lions at the Cowboys. 48.5 point total here as well. Cowboys 7-point favorites because they are expected to get Dak back from his thumb injury. Full practice on Wednesday. He was practicing last week too. So I've warmed to Dak as the week has gone along in terms of how I feel about him. Dallas has an elite defense though, and that may prevent a Jared Goff-led offense from keeping up. That's concerning. And Dak is his first game back. So I want to keep myself from getting too excited about this game, but I do like it more now than I did on Monday when we first talked. Where are you at with Cowboys versus Lions?
Yeah, so I flagged whenever we did the salary scroll on Monday's recap show, I flagged Dak at 75 as being someone I very much considered, sort of anticipated that he would be in the consideration set for my main quarterback. I think I'm still there.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger fear, unfortunately, and I'm glad to hear you say it because I didn't. You just got to talk up Mariota.
If I can talk up Mariota, then I can, or Mariota. If I can, then I can, throw a little bit of shade at my boy Jared, my son, my large blonde son, Jared. I don't know how that happened, but whatever.
So, Goff's had some interesting splits already, and I think we're deep enough in the season where we can look at some splits. As you mentioned, Dallas has a good defense. In 2 games against top 12 adjusted pass defenses based on numberFire's metrics, Goff's at 12.8 fantasy points per game, 220 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, negative 0.19 passing net expected points per dropback, league average being about positive 0.06. In the 3 games outside that split against weaker defenses, that's when he's put up almost 24 points per game, over 300 yards a game, 3 touchdowns. Like some quarterbacks are matchup dependent. I think it would not shock anyone to not to write off Goff as like matchup dependent, but taking advantage of good matchups, maybe being a little bit more limited in tougher matchups. So that's why I can't go, full 2 QB game type of stack, even though Goff's shown that ability to like light the torch. I think it's a 1 QB game though.
I think that the one thing that's encouraging for him is that those games against tougher defenses, at least the Patriots one, he had nobody. Like everybody was out.
Yeah.
Amon-Ra was limited in that game. No Chark.
Explain it away.
What?
I knew you were going to have a rebuttal in favor of Jared Goff, and I was just waiting for it.
It's more so like I'm providing like the counter argument that people would say to this, because I agree with you. And the other thing too that I think is helpful for this game as a whole is that the one thing that the reason that their defense is so good is because they create chaos up front, and the Detroit defensive or offensive line is very good. Taylor Decker didn't practice Wednesday. It says it was a personal issue, so I'm guessing he'll play, but worth mentioning on that. And they're probably healthier up front than they've been most of this year. So I think that's encouraging for them. That's why I'm not writing this game off as a stack. I think that if I want to go at it, though, I kind of like doing so with DeAndre Swift. He was limited in practice Wednesday. I would prefer to full. And it sounds like he's not as firm in playing as I thought he might be based on what he was saying post-practice, but I do like him quite a bit. Amon-Ra St. Brown's salary is down to 75. I also think that's pretty intriguing given that we know what he can do. And I don't care as much about receivers against Dallas as I do against a quarterback. So I think that both Amon-Ra and DeAndre Swift are very, very fun bringbacks on this Detroit team. I will still use them despite respecting this Dallas defense a lot. I think that just keeps me getting too excited about this game as a whole. The Dallas side, though, I will get excited about. I think that specifically Michael Gallup at 61, he's had a 23% target share in 2 games. The past 2 games, it's, I think, 19% in his full 3 games, if you want to count all those. But getting Dak back, we know Dak is a better quarterback than Cooper Rush. And I feel like we're in store for either a Lamb or a Gallup game here very soon. So I like the Dallas side a lot, and I will not be talked out of that, even if I'm worried about the Detroit offense. But, more so thinking about Amon-Ra and DeAndre on the Lions side.
Yeah, with Amon-Ra, he should, in theory, avoid Trayvon Diggs a lot, running from the slot.
Yeah, I think that like last year when we talked about Diggs, it was like, okay, I don't care about if Diggs is on guys because like he's chaotic and like he'll let up big plays. He hasn't done that as much this year because he's just been really good overall. So I think it's good to flag that because people will be like, oh, he lets a lot of long plays, and he's been better at that this year. So I think that's a good flag.
So yeah, Pro Football Focus has 66% of St. Brown's snaps coming from the slot. Diggs covering, he's in the slot on about 8%. So he might not really like follow St. Brown.
Yeah.
He likes to stay on the one side of the field for the most part. So I think that it's a good call out with St. Brown being very much in play, especially when we're stacking up this game.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, I feel like somehow, some way I've become more pro CeeDee Lamb than you. I know a lot of that had to do with the fact of who his quarterback was.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on Lamb at 77? How do you actually view yourself stacking this game?
Via Gallup for the most part. So Lamb, like I don't tend to worry about cornerback matchups very often. Mostly because like teams don't run man very often. So like you're not seeing a lot of guys actually on opposing wide receivers. So it's kind of like who cares situation in general. But one of like the few teams in the league that actually does run man quite a bit is the Lions, and Jeff Okudah has played really well this year. So I worry about it a bit more with them. And it's not like I can't really use him as a result of that. It's more so like I downgrade him a bit as a result of that situation. So a slight downgrade to CeeDee Lamb under the assumption that he sees some Jeff Okudah because Lamb does run outside quite a bit, got about a 58% slot rate. So like does run inside enough to avoid him. So I would say if I'm ranking receivers in the 7,000 range, which is Mike Williams, Debo, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman, Amon-Ra, et cetera, and then T Higgins at the bottom. I think T is 1. I would say Mike Williams 2, Lamb 3, Debo 4. So Lamb is still pretty up there and high enough where I'll still use him. But I think that Gallup is the best guy in his tier, which is why I'm higher on him.
Yeah, I agree with that. Any thoughts on the? I know you're going to say no, but any thoughts on the Cowboys running backs?
No, that's my thought. You can talk me into them if you want, but it's not going to work. You can talk someone else into them.
I just wish that Zeke was like 63, 64.
I wish he were still getting passing game work. That's my biggest issue with him right now is he's not. If he were, I'd be more intrigued, but he's not. It's not like a Zeke's bad. I think Zeke's fine. I just hate his passing game role right now.
Yeah.
He's at 1.3 targets per game this year. I need more.
I kind of feel like Dak's going to just come back, move the ball on this defense, and then Zeke's getting like 2 goal line touchdowns and
2 goal line touchdowns and 15 FanDuel points. Well,
hey, come on now.
Sorry, I'll bump up to 18. 18 FanDuel points.
People are too hard on Zeke.
No, I like Zeke. I hate his role. Like that's the thing. I want more passing game work. So that I'm a pro. Like I like Zeke more than most. You know that.
Yeah.
I hate his role. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
If he were getting 3 targets per game, like Walker got last week, like Aaron Jones is a 3.8. Like if you were getting that, I'd be more intrigued, but he's not. So I'm not. That's my main issue with him is not talent, it's usage.
Okay. But we're into this game.
Uh-huh.
Kind of a lot of ways to go.
Preference for you between Swift and St. Brown as a ring back?
Probably St. Brown because Swift, I don't know how healthy he is, and he also can just get yanked in the red zone.
I agree with you too. I like that as well. So that game is a high total. Let's talk about games with low totals. So we move into our trends discussion for week number 7. You're looking at totals because we got a lot of low totals on the board for this week, and that'll be relevant for us with running backs and stuff like that. So you're looking at different positions and how they do in games with low totals. What did you find when looking at that data?
Yeah, so we don't do trends on teams in the odds section that we discussed, the best game stacks. There weren't a whole lot of interesting offenses to go over, so I figured why not look at like how teams perform in games with low totals because, like I said, we're nitpicking these games with high totals, and so we might be saying like, okay, well, why don't we look at these other games and see, what's here? So I wanted to look at some trends on results from fantasy performers in games with low totals. There's a pretty clear line of demarcation. 6 games this week have a total of 45.5 or higher, and then 5 have a total of 42.5 or lower. Since 2016, quarterbacks in games with totals of 45.5 or higher, so these higher scoring games, they average 18.5 FanDuel points. They reach 300 yards passing in about 30% of those games, and 3 touchdowns in about 25%. In these lower total games, they average 14.6 FanDuel points. They get to 300 yards just 12% of the time, again, compared to 30% in the games with higher totals. 3+ touchdowns and 12%, again, 25% in that higher sample. So they're about half as likely to go for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, which if you're not a rushing quarterback, you got to be able to do that to have like a semblance of a ceiling, even if your salary is in the 6,000 range. Like if you can't give me 303, I'm not interested. Even if you're giving me like per dollar, like projected per dollar value, I need more than that. Of course, then, quarterback efficiency and production is tied pretty heavily to overall game environment. So that trickles down into tight ends and receivers. Projected wide receiver 1, so the highest projected receiver pregame based on numberFire's projections, they fall from 13 FanDuel points to 10.6 between the higher and lower total games. Their 100-yard odds go from 22% to 15%. So it's not like these guys in lower total games never have good games. That's not what I'm saying. But it's less likely, which is, again, obvious. But I think it's fair to call out, like, if we're nitpicking these higher games, what's the difference, and why are we still trying to force our way into liking the higher total games? And, like on a per game average, they fall from 69 yards to 59 yards. Again, these wide receiver ones. Tight end ones from 7.4 FanDuel points to 5.7, 40 yards per game to 31. So it impacts tight ends. Obviously, touchdown expectations also down for tight ends, which hurts a good bit. Running backs, though, are less susceptible to the games with low totals. The per game average falls for RB1s pregame projected from, or pregame projected RB1s, their actual totals average 13.6 FanDuel points per game in the higher total games, falls down about 2 points to 11.7 in these games with lower totals. A lot of that has to do with the touchdown expectations because the yardage itself, not that different. It's about a 15% chance for those RB1s to get to 100 plus yards in the higher total games, but actually 16% in those lower total games to probably just uglier, more run heavy teams to begin with. And it's only about a 7 yards per game difference between the high and low total games. So, like, yes, we want guys in games with high totals. That's why we talk about it. That's why everyone talks about it. We all know this, but I just felt like I was looking at the slate, didn't know which offenses left over to dig into. So I figured maybe the real key this week is to fade the games if we think they're imperfect. If they're not good, can't we just go to these other games? And not really overall, especially not at quarterback. I think my quarterback consideration set needs to be in games with high totals. If there are certain wide receivers or tight ends that have good paths, obvious paths, I'm willing to go there. At running back, I'm much more likely just to ignore total. But I don't think the way to differentiate this week is to look at that, because again, it's basically split into two tiers this week with the games. I don't think that the answer is getting too cute and trusting these games with low totals, because historically speaking, it is not a good play.
So to highlight guys who would be impacted by this, so looking at receivers and tight ends, because the quarterbacks we're considering are not in these games, so that's not an issue. But receivers and tight ends in those low total games, Cade Otton, he's in one of those games. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, I don't think we were super high on them to begin with, but like that would impact Cade Otton on that side. It would impact Romeo Doubs, who I like at 58. It would impact Robert Tonyan, who is a consideration, but not a guy I love at 55. It would impact Michael Pittman if you like bunny targets. Let me see here. It would impact if you were into the Jacksonville guys or Wan'Dale Robinson in that game. Impact him. I don't think we're super into any of the Broncos or Jets pass catchers, except for Dulcich potentially. Those are the primary ones. So I think the biggest thing for me is asking myself, is Dobbs' role good enough? And is Otton's role good enough to overcome bad totals? Because it's not just like the averages. You talked about averages. You did reference upside too with the yardage numbers, but like in perfect lineups, you don't see guys from low total games very often either. So it is upside too. So do I feel good enough and firm enough in Otton's role and Dobbs' role to like still use them despite the bad game environments? Maybe I shouldn't. I think those are the two that I'm pausing the most with right now.
Yeah, so it took me a long time to figure out the three loves for the end of the show at receiver because, you know, spoiler alert, we both love T. Higgins. We both love DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Michael Gallup. Those four we have a lot of overlap with. Looking lower than that, because I think it's going to help me a lot if I go lower than that, I kept going to Romeo Doubs, but I was like, this is not a good game environment historically for receivers to have legitimate upside. Should I move away from that? And again, it's we can focus on Dobbs and say, like, here's why that doesn't matter. And if you can get there, that's fine, because there still is paths to upside for certain players in low total games. Like, this is not to say you can't touch any of these guys, but in thinking of ways to get different, like, this is going to hurt. Like Tennessee, Indianapolis, I was like, this game has like kind of clear players that I could pivot to and build a really unique lineup.
I did bet the over in that game. So there is a path to that game being less poopy.
It actually rates out fairly well relative to the non-elite, the two elite games of the week in terms of like stackability. But the trend itself is kind of damning for guys like Pittman.
Yeah. I wouldn't use stackability because that implies both sides, and I refuse to use a Colts player, except for maybe their alpha wide receiver, Alec Pierce.
Yeah.
But, you know.
I just, it's good to get a reality check and make sure we're not overlooking stuff. But that does mean we can kind of cut out 5 of the 11 games on the slate for the most part.
Yeah. Except for running back.
Except
like Hall is still fine. Yeah, as you
Yes,
mentioned.
that was
So,
the other thing is
yep.
I like Brees. I wanted to make sure I was justified in still liking him, even though the total's low.
Okay. Yep, I'd agree. So let's talk here about my first trend. That's the Bengals offense, because they got off to a brutal start this year and it killed pieces within their offense, like Joe Mixon mostly. But they've been getting better recently and they face Atlanta this week. I think we should give the Bengals a long look. If you look at their early down passing efficiency, they underperformed or met expectations based on their matchup in each of the first 3 games. So that's bad. They were a below average offense the first 3 weeks. In that Thursday game against Miami, they were 0.13 above expectation per dropback. They struggled against the Ravens, bounced back to 0.17 against New Orleans. So they've been trending up and showing upside in 2 of their past 3 games. But that's not like a random trend. I'm not cherry picking here because the valleys have typically coincided with when T. Higgins has not been healthy. Higgins barely played in 2 separate games this year, and they fell well short of expectations in both those games. In the 4 games with full snaps for Higgins, they've met expectations once and they've well exceeded them twice. So when Higgins is healthy, this offense is much better. And the run game is getting better as well. They underperformed relative to expectations big time each of their first 4 games, but they've actually exceeded expectations in 2 straight now from a rushing perspective. For the full season, they're still 30th in opponent adjusted early down rushing efficiency, which is bad, but it's getting better than it was. And this is all while having decent success the entire year, even when they were struggling on late downs. So they're trending up both in the passing game and the ground game, and their movement in the passing game is tied to T. Higgins, who is getting further removed from his injury. I think that bodes really well for this week. Atlanta struggles against both the pass and the rush. They're not specifically awful against any one individual position. So I think we can just go at them with our favorite pieces here. Joe Mixon has not topped 88 yards in scrimmage since week 1, and his role has not been as great the past 2 weeks, but still a snap rate above 70%. I doubt people are on him this week. I think he could be very fun for tournaments. I love Higgins, though. Higgins is my favorite piece of the slate at any position, I think. Is that fair? I think that's where it is for me, because in the games he's played with Chase, full games, 26% target share, 42% deep, leads the team in both those categories, and is tied with Chase in red zone targets. Chase has great shares too. This is not to diminish him, but 25% overall, 37% in deep. People probably going to be there after his big game last week. So I want to load up on Higgins this week. I think Mixon will be a guy I target if he's under rostered. Chase is awesome too, but I'd rank him 3rd due to salary. Still want exposure. So where are you on the Bengals? And will you get to Joe Burrow at 83?
I was actually going to ask, like, okay, you're saying all this stuff. Why not Joe Burrow?
I think because people will chase the points and he'll be more popular than he should be relative to his rushing output.
Okay. I don't. Do you care about that, like popularity of quarterback? Because unless it's an outlier number, it historically doesn't matter.
I care about it if I can get someone who's on like 4% of rosters who has an easier path to a ceiling game, aka Mahomes or something like that.
Burrow or Herbert? Because it seems like Herbert, but
neither runs, like at least not right now. So
true.
Maybe that's right where Burrow's a pivot off of Herbert. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think I was too low on Burrow. It's always possible that he is chalky, but anytime there's a pretty clear value quarterback, they can catch some popularity, and Geno should be around maybe 15% or so, 12 to 15%. That alone will eat enough away from everyone else, where I don't think anyone else is going to get prohibitive. But yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Burrow, but I love Joe Mixon. I think it's all of the question marks we have with his actual production over expectation, that's accounted for in his salary.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is a very obvious spot just to play Joe Mixon. I don't think that this is one of those situations where you can even say like, okay, well, I played Joe Mixon at 74, or I played Joe Mixon and I regret it. It's like you play Joe Mixon with this workload at 74. I don't think in this matchup too, like it's a very good matchup. I don't think I can walk away from this one at Is there 1 o'clock? Like, it's not going to be 2 o'clock. I'm like, why did I play Joe Mixon? So it might be like, why did I play
I have had that
Zeke?
thought this
But,
year,
like,
but I'm less worried about it than I thought I'd be.
at higher salaries, I mean, his salary must have
Yeah,
been
yeah.
like
83 or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is different. So I love Mixon, love T. He's going to open things up for, well, Jamar Chase opens things up for T. Higgins. As much as we love T. Higgins on this podcast.
But T. Higgins opens things up for us.
Yes. I want to make the joke that like T. Higgins is better than Jamar Chase. It's just, if you actually kind of
do that.
Yeah,
they're both great.
They're both awesome, but
yeah.
Teams focus on Chase. That leaves Higgins open. I love all 4 of them.
Yeah.
So.
Atlanta has some secondary injuries too. I think Terrell will probably play, but Hayward won't. So that's a good thing for Higgins as well. Higgins is the cover boy for the YouTube stream today too. Just so you know. I think he's the best play on the slate. What?
Can you bring it back?
Bring what back? Oh, so like, yes, you can.
Yeah,
you can. The problem is that I don't know if I can with Burrow because like, well, no, that's not right. I think, okay, the reason I'm worried about bringing it back with it in a Burrow lineup is because if I use a Falcons player, that means I'm assuming they're forced to throw. And forced to throw means that Cleveland or Cincinnati gets an early lead. If they get an early lead, they're probably going to run. So I feel like in a Burrow lineup, I might be less likely to bring it back than with a Mixon lineup, as like counterthetical to my typical process that may be.
That might be overthinking it.
Maybe.
It could be very, very much the case. My bigger concern is I don't know where to go.
Yeah.
I can't keep doing Kyle Pitts forever.
I haven't used him in a while, so I could go there, I guess, but like, because I haven't been burned by him. But like, what's the upside of 5 targets for those 2 guys? Like 5 targets could be a 25% target share for them.
It sure could.
Like, just Marcus Mariota won NFC Offensive Player of the Week with 14 passing attempts last week.
So we're going to get into this with my next trend, but what's the fear level 1 through 10 of 10 being like super terrified that the Falcons can just control the clock and ruin the game?
Not that high.
Okay.
Like, they've played some fun games this year despite being annoying.
Yeah.
So I'm not that worried about them personally.
Okay,
let's go to your second trend. Then you were alluding to the Cleveland offense, who can be annoying at times. Facing Lamar this week on a slate where we don't have a lot of rushing quarterbacks. So what are you seeing with this Cleveland offense and how it impacts this game as a whole?
Just checking in. Rashad Bateman limited yesterday or Wednesday at practice, I should say. Anyway, we love the Ravens offense always. We love Lamar Jackson. He is the best process-based play of the week at quarterback. We almost assuredly have the salary to get there because we can go down at tight end. We also love Mark Andrews. He's a lot harder to get to, but one offense, that just continues to elude me is the Browns because I can never figure them out. But also one offense that can ruin things is the Browns. This year, they are 29th in pass rate over expectation at a minus 7.9%. They're 27th in overall pass rate at 52%. When they're trailing by any amount, they do bump it up to a 61% pass rate, but that's still below the NFL average of 64% and still about 7 percentage points below expectation based on all the game conditions that NFL Fasters model uses. Baltimore is just worse than the NFL average in rushing yards over expectation allowed, rushing success rate allowed. That's a bit worrisome because the Browns can and want to go with a run-heavy approach and kill the clock. As a result of this efficient rushing offense, Cleveland has ran. That's the one I don't know that one.
Runned.
Okay.
Has runned.
68.3 passing plus rushing plays per game. That's 4th most in the NFL, and they've faced 58.5 per game, 3rd fewest. Baltimore already, because of their play style, doesn't run a whole lot of plays themselves, 57, and they're facing almost 65, which is sixth most. Part of that is just, just part of like playing from ahead. So their team's like trying to catch up, that kind of stuff a little bit. But what I'm getting at is Cleveland runs a lot of plays, doesn't face that many. And that's the inverse for the Ravens. So we could see Baltimore on the sidelines a lot while Nick Chubb is just grinding things away. So I think there is legitimate fear on my end. This could be overthinking it, of course. But I think that there's fear that the Browns do kind of ruin this game, keep the Ravens offense off the field enough, and then we're banking on just hyper efficiency from the Ravens. Nick Chubb is my nemesis in 2022. He's my new nemesis. He's averaged 19.3 FanDuel points per game on 22 adjusted opportunities, which is carries plus double your targets. Almost 117 yards from scrimmage per game. I have him at 14.3 expected FanDuel points per game because he doesn't get a whole lot of receiving. He's a very efficient player. So he's always going to overperform that. But I don't know if I'm going to bring back my Lamar with Nick Chubb. I think that if I like Lamar and I think he's going to put up points, then Nick Chubb's probably going to do something. So that's a little bit of a concern. We always like David Njoku. He's got an 18% target share, 58 yards per game. That's fourth best among all tight ends. You shaking your head?
I was shaking my head because I was so excited to use him. Sorry. Go ahead.
At times, I've had interest in Amari Cooper. He's averaging 9.2 targets per game. That's 12th among receivers, but he's 31st in yards per game. I think he's oversalaried.
58 per game.
I think he's oversalaried at 72, but again, are we forcing in stacks? Are we playing suboptimal? Are we okay playing Lamar by himself? Yes. Nobody else in this game.
Yes. Well, Lamar with Njoku, I think, is the way I'd want to stack this game. If I have a single entry lineup right now, I might do that. Lamar with Njoku, because it's so hard to get back up to Andrews.
It is.
And he could torch me. But I think the leverage, or the not leverage, the financial flexibility I get elsewhere. I sound like a 45-year-old dad. Financial flexibility.
Well, there's a legitimate opportunity cost in rostering Mark Andrews because it's not 75, it's 85 this week.
Yeah. The reason I'm bullish on Baltimore is because I think their offense is due for an explosion very soon. If you look at, so I have opponent adjusted numbers on early down efficiency because I just want teams to be efficient early downs because that's how you can build sustainable offenses.
I thought the goal of an offensive coordinator was to get into third and short.
Yes, third and manageable, actually, not short, manageable. Please get the wording correctly. Early down efficiency this year, adjusted for opponent. Number one, Baltimore 0.194 expected points per play based on numberFire's net expected points per play based on numberFire's metric. Again, my own adjustments could be wrong. The second best team is at 0.142. They are 0.05 per play better than every other team in football in early downs. I think that eventually that's going to lead to a game where they drop 42 in the first half. Maybe not the first half, but they're going to explode at some point. And when you pair that with a quarterback who is still running a lot in Lamar, and I think still playing very well, potentially getting his number two pass catcher back this week in Rashad Bateman, I feel like that situation where I want to take advantage of that on a slate where not a lot of quarterbacks can hang 40 and he can. So I know that he'll be popular, but I don't care. And I think that that's why, even in a bad game environment, I don't know how much I care. I think that Lamar is, I'm going to revise my previous statement, and I'll say he is in a tier of his own this week at quarterback. Because of the early down efficiency, because the fact I think they're going to explode pretty soon, I want to be heavily in on them here, specifically with Lamar, and I don't care about the rest.
Right. I agree with that. I would have Lamar in a tier of his own. I'm not afraid of going 100% with a quarterback in all my lineups. Lamar in a different matchup this week, I think would he would be very close to that. This week, I think he's more 50%. And I agree. I want to differentiate a little bit more because I do fear that this game is gross. Yeah.
So to put words in your mouth, because that's what people love having done to them, you are taking Lamar from his typical baseline relative to the other guys in this slate and downgrading him for game environment. I think that's fully fair. I agree with that. We'll do the exact same thing. And I think that we're on the same page, which is encouraging to me. So my final trend is talking about Houston's offense. Again, weird, but whatever. I think the Raiders are pretty fun this week. Josh Jacobs for the most part, but potentially Foster Moreau as well. The question is, can I run it back with guys on the opposing side? And I do think you can, but it's complicated. Dameon Pierce, definitely fine. That's not complicated. He's good. I liked the Vegas run defense coming into the year, but they've been below average against the rush and early downs, adjusting for schedule. So that's fine. Pierce, 107.5 yards from scrimmage per game in the 4 games as lead back, 61% red zone share, which is absurd for a running back this year. So stacking Pierce with Josh Jacobs, pretty appealing this week. The passing offense has also been better than I thought they were on early downs. They rank 16th there once you adjust for schedule. The problem is that they are awful on late downs. A 33% success rate adjusted for opponent, which ranks second to last, ahead of just Carolina. Not great company to keep. And what that does, it cuts drives short, keeps them from scoring, keeps their games low scoring, and the targets also are not super concentrated. Brandon Cooks leads with a 26% target share, but he's at 27% of the deep targets. Nico Collins leads there at 39%, but has just a 17% overall share. They're cannibalizing each other, and it's led to neither guy topping 82 yards yet this year. If Cooks were to not play, I'd use Collins happily. I'd be very into him there as a value receiver at 56. I prefer Collins with Cooks in there at 56 because of the salary, but I'd probably just like my threshold at wide receiver is, can you give me 85 yards or 2 touchdowns? Not really sure about that answer. So I probably just might not get to either. What?
Nico or MVS? Same salary.
Nico? Is that offensive? That seems offensive, right? I should be appalled at myself, right?
I'm not gonna. I would have Marquez Valdez-Scantling over Nico Collins. Like, you can play both if you have like enough.
I'd rather play neither, but like
right. But we might need.
I'd probably go Nico by a bit, but I don't know. If Cooks doesn't play, it's Nico by a mile. But I don't know. I love using guys against the Raiders in general. I think it might just be limited to Pierce this week, though, because of the underwhelming passing game. Do you have a different read on the Texans than I do?
I don't really have a read on the Texans.
What about Pierce? Where are you on him?
I see the case. I see the appeal, but personally, it takes to want to play a running back as a 7-point or whatever the spread is currently underdog. I have to feel flawless. I don't know if I'm quite there. I think this offense could also still implode.
They could. I think that's less likely against a bottom rung defense. Like, they got to get pass rush, but that's all they can do basically.
Yeah. Davis Mills league average sack rate, not great at like avoiding sacks.
Not great at both things.
So
yeah,
I don't. Again, I'm not talking you out of this. Again, you're only saying Pierce here,
unless Cook sits for.
Right.
I don't think he will, but like I want to make the caveat in case something happens.
I agree with you with Pierce. He's playable if you want to kind of stack this one up a little bit. Otherwise, I think it's getting too cute for no reason.
Pierce or Breece Hall?
Breece.
I think I go Breece too, but not a slam dunk. Pierce or DeAndre Swift?
Too early to say in the week, honestly. I don't know if how healthy Swift is.
Okay.
I'd go Swift if he's full in practice by Friday.
Okay, I think I'd agree with that too. So maybe I'm lower on Pierce than I thought I was, but like I want to have some game stacks where I have Jacobs paired with Pierce specifically, because I think this game is not that terrible. And I think Pierce's role is good. Josh Jacobs' role is awesome. So that's what I would say there.
And do you see yourself getting to Devontae Adams realistically?
Realistically, probably not. I probably should. Like, should I? Yes. Will I? I don't know, man. Because like I want to get some Jamar Chase, and I won't be up there very often. So that's my issue. I don't know. The bummer. Weather for this week. Wind speeds in Jacksonville for the Jags and the Giants. 11 miles per hour would be fine if it stayed there, but check back on that later. Same thing in Nashville for the Titans and the Colts. And then wind speeds in Denver for the Broncos and Jets are at 14 miles per hour. Brett Rippin. Maybe you have to rip it through the wind in Denver as well. Let's dive now into our positional plays for week number 7. Starting off at quarterback, Brandon, who do you have there?
I thought it was going to be a 4-quarterback week. It's now extended to 6 with Mahomes and Joe Burrow in the conversation. But I think the one play I might have the most of relative to the field is Justin Herbert at 81. Love the salary. Love the upside at that salary. As you mentioned on Monday's show, his ADOT's been down the past 3 games, but he played some really weird splits in terms of like who he's faced. 3 teams to start the year that allowed downfield passing, then 3 that didn't. And Seattle's 29th in ADOT faced, 28th in yards per target allowed on downfield passes. I think we can take advantage of that game, that sort of dud game in prime time. And there's no weather issues as well, which I think is going to help separate things a little bit this week. You're making a face.
There's a new Russell Wilson Subway ad, and it's upsetting. He's using a fork and knife to cut a Subway sandwich. I'm watching it with no audio, and I'm okay with that. I can't handle the cringe. I'm shutting this tab.
In case anyone wonders what it's like to podcast with Jim.
I'm so upset right now.
I was like, did I say something wrong?
I might cry. I'm so upset by seeing that video.
I think it was a coin flip between Dak and Geno for my second love. I have Geno in here. Geno versus Herbert is what I wish Geno versus Kyler was going to be. It was a down game for the receivers last week as well, that the primary receivers. I'm more than fine with that. He's at 0.22 passing net expected points per dropback on the year. That's 0.14 over expectation per dropback. There are big games that can be had from Lamar, Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert. But I think Geno is in that tier with upside at a much lower salary. So I'm going to have a good bit of Geno this week.
Revenge game, importantly. Also, I mentioned before that the Ravens lead the league in early down efficiency after adjusting for schedule. The team that's second at 0.142 is Geno, MF, and Smith's Seattle Seahawks. And so those are my top 2 loves this week at quarterback, Lamar Jackson and Geno Smith. Lamar, 58 or more rushing yards in 5 straight games. Might get Rashad Bateman back this week. Hasn't had an eruption recently, but I think based on their underlying numbers, that's within the range of outcomes. The Browns linebackers are bad. So I want to get to Lamar at 88, despite the legitimate concerns you brought up earlier, and I think those are valid, but I'm still going to use Lamar. You mentioned the Geno stuff. I think that he's tremendous, despite joking about the revenge game. He's had 40 rushing yards in 2 of the past 3 games. I think they can win this game. I got the money line Tuesday at plus 250. I think that they got a shot in this one. So go Hawks, baby. Let's ride. I think that they're fun. I think that Dak he's right there. Like the Dak, Herbert, Burrow discussion is really tough for me because I think all those guys could make a case. I might have Geno number 2 behind Lamar after considering his salary. Is that wild?
Considering salary, no, that's why I have him here too.
Okay, cool.
I just feel weird because I want to make sure I'm not too low on Mahomes and Burrow. I can only play so many quarterbacks. I basically cap it at 3.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to take a long, hard look at this, but I think there are 6 quarterbacks who are very much in a tier of their, like if we make the tier wide, just the consideration set, I think it's those 6.
I think I'd agree. Okay, running back, what you got there?
I'm sticking in the mid-range here. If I build a lineup with like Lamar, a $4,000 defense, and these 3 running backs, I'm at 62.25 for 3 receivers and a tight end. I feel pretty good about that, but those 3 are Breece Hall, Joe Mixon, and Kenneth Walker. Breece Hall at 76. I'm a little bit nervous about the low total, but again, as I went over, it doesn't matter as much for running backs. Denver's about average against running backs on the year, allowing a 0.37 rushing yards over expectation to the position overall. In his 3 games with a 2/3 snap rate or better, 25 adjusted opportunities per game, 132 yards per game, 15.5 expected FanDuel points, which ranks him 10th among running backs in that split. I think I believe that Denver's offense is good, but I don't think that it matters so much. We could also see a lot of bunny targets if the wind is up. So I think that's a good spot for Brees. I would prefer Swift if he was full because I like that game a lot more, but I couldn't go out on a limb this early in the week. Love Joe Mixon. I know the results haven't been there, but he is the 5th largest underperformer among running backs in my expected FanDuel points model. Atlanta's not good against the run, 29th in rushing success rate allowed. He's attached to a good offense. There's still potential at this new salary. I think he is going to be he might be the running back I have most exposure to. Maybe Kenneth Walker. Walker should be Walker probably. The Chargers defense, rush defense, not good. They did limit Denver's backs, but I don't think that's saying a whole lot based on who was out there running the ball for them. They're allowing a league high 1.56 rushing yards over expectation per carry, the 3rd most adjusted rushing FanDuel points per carry as well. Don't love a guy who can be scripted out in a 2-minute drill, but the second half was very, very promising for Walker last week.
Yeah, Walker's my loves too for the same reasons you mentioned. 21 carries, 3 targets in that game. I like this game. As I mentioned, I bet the Seahawks money line on Tuesday. So I think they can win this game, much less keep it close. So I think that Walker makes a lot of sense. 73 fits my roster construction this week. Final guy before a tier drop off. He checks every box in that regard. I do have Josh Jacobs as my number 1 love as far as like the highest salary guy because his salary is way up, but that's justified. Houston is awful against the rush. Jacobs, 175 yards in scrimmage in back-to-back games and 80% snap rate in both those. It seems like they just trust him right now, which is wild given they declined his 5th-year option, stuff like that. I think that his ceiling is very big, and I want to get to Josh Jacobs again. My middle love between Walker and Jacobs, I don't know, honestly. I like Mixon. I like Swift. I like Hall. I like all those guys. And I like Pierce too. So I think that what I would just say is pepper that range. Load up on guys down there. If I had to pick one, I think that like if I'm picking 2 guys to like feel great about, Walker is the first guy I feel great about on the entire slate at running back. I might go Jacobs 2 and then plunge back down here for the other options. I'm gravitating more towards Brees as I think about it more. 132 yards in scrimmage per game in the 3 games with a 60% snap rate. I don't know. You can run on Denver a bit, so I'm getting higher on him. I've liked him for the entire time he's been breaking out, but I think I'm getting higher on him now. So maybe it's Brees over Swift. But if Swift gets into full practice Friday, arrows up on him in a fun game to stack. Wide receiver, this one is more fun, I think, than try to figure out which running back I like. Because I actually know which receivers I like. Who do you got there?
I have Tyler Lockett here, 68. He is one of 4 receivers for me to classify as being in a game with a high total, projected for high volume, with a high ADOT, and a low wind situation. Metcalf applies as well, but Lockett does have the better individual matchup according to Pro Football Focus. I love both. It's just going to be a question of like which one I click on in my main lineups, but like this game a lot. The Chargers collectively neutral against receivers, really good salary. Second love is Michael Gallup at 61. One of the other receivers to hit all 4 boxes. Big Mike is the 4th, in case anyone was wondering. Gallup was a write down on Monday for us, not moving away from that throughout the week. He has ran, I got to look this up. He has ran at least 82% of the routes in all 3 games that he's played. Target totals of 3, 5, and 7 in those, but now those are going to be tied to a much more efficient passing offense. My third love for now, and probably still because I don't know how much I can move away from it, is Romeo Doubs at 58. I don't love the trend of low totals, but it's really hard to find receivers in better spots than this. I just know I'm going to have a good amount of exposure here. Washington allows a 22% target per route rate to receivers. League average is 20%, so that's probably just something about their offense, and also they're not particularly good, allowing 1.98 yards per route run to receivers. League average is about a 1.6. There's room to grow for him. He's got 8 targets in 3 of 4 games. And of course, Dobbs is Robert McLeish.
I don't know that reference.
It's from White Collar. We watched the show.
But
if
like,
anyone gets that reference, like, we're
it's
cool.
not. I liked that show.
It's a very deep cut reference from a show that people don't even know. So
I've rewatched parts of it, and I don't get the reference still. So you've explained it to me too. I don't get it. My top love is T. Higgins. I think again, T. Higgins is the best play on the slate, regardless of position. He's awesome. In the full games he has played, 26% target share, 42% deep, 25% in the red zone. You can throw against Atlanta. I think that the Bengals offense makes a lot of sense. So give me T. Higgins as often as I can possibly get him. My second love is Michael Gallup with Dak Prescott being back. Gallup has a 23% target share his past 2 games. He had 3 deep targets last week with a guy who has a noodle arm. Now is Dak Prescott, who doesn't have the biggest arm, but it's not a noodle. So I like Gallup a lot at 61. My third love is also Romeo Doubs. I don't know, man. I think I agree with your vibe around it, where it's like, here because I have to be. I think my preference at receiver is to have Higgins, Gallup, and then either Lockett or Metcalf. I think that's probably the way I prefer to go. If that means I have to skip over Josh Jacobs and use 3 running backs in the 7,000 range, I think I'm okay making that sacrifice. Or if it means I have to go down to Dulcich at tight end, I'm okay getting there. So Dobbs is fine. My favorite guy in the 5,000 range, 20% target share in his 4 full games or 4 games as a full-time player. Not a ton of high leverage work, but might get more work now with no Randall Cobb. I think that's kind of the one thing getting me through is not having Cobb there may up his role. So I was asking before, is Dobbs' role good enough to overcome a bad total? I think that's more likely to be true with no Cobb. Yep. So that's where I'm at there. Tight end, what you doing there?
David Njoku, 57. We both love him. I know that. Baltimore's allowing a catch rate over expectation of 8.7 points to tight ends. They're 24th in adjusted FanDuel points per target allowed to the position. Again, he's 4th in yards per game among tight ends. There's that yardage upside, but also stacks really well with Lamar. You got to like that. And then my second love, weirdly, we have a few guys who are in the consideration set at or below 5,000. I like Dalton Schultz, I think, just because I'm going to be on this game a ton. 4,800, already got in a full practice on Wednesday. That's a great sign. In his 3 games with at least 80% of the snaps, he has an 82% route rate, 5.3 targets per game, 1.3 downfield targets per game, so targets at least 10 yards downfield. Huge quarterback upgrade and a really good matchup for him, with Detroit being 26th in adjusted FanDuel points per target allowed to tight ends.
I also have David Njoku as my top guy for the reasons you mentioned. 18% target share, as you mentioned, yardage upside at tight end, which is kind of hard to find. And it's a game where I'll have Lamar, so I want to bring back, and Njoku is my favorite way to bring it back on the Browns side. I'm going back and forth between Cade Otton and Dalton Schultz. The more I think about it, Schultz is probably the better play. I think you're right. I was hesitant before because I didn't like Schultz earlier on this year when his salary was in the 6,000 range. I was like, I can't justify this a guy who doesn't have a great workload at that number, but he has Dak back now. His salary is way down to 48. So I do like Cade Otton. Totally fine considering him, but I think if you force me to choose now, I'd probably go Schultz. I think that's the better way. And I would say again, if Russ plays, despite having cringy Subway ads that are making me want to vomit while I'm on air, and despite having a hamstring injury, if he plays, I would go Dulcich at 4,002 at times. But Schultz is probably the best play below 5,000. I think you're correct in that. The more I think about it, defense. Talk me into someone there, since you already did it at tight end.
I know there are reasons to like the Texans offense.
Sorry, I forgot Foster Moreau as well. 46.
Good call out.
Forgot about that too. So there are 4 guys below 5,000 we like.
Well, speaking of that team, the Raiders I think are in play at 4,000. I'll have a little bit of extra salary, not in I don't even know what to do with this salary. It's not bad. It's just based on how things break out. I'm not gonna have enough to get back up to the tight ends or to the superstar receivers. So I'm gonna have a little bit of wiggle room. Pro Football Focus gives Vegas the best rush D advantage of the week on the main slate. A better than average pass defense matchup. Davis Mills, average sack rate, underperforming relative to expectations. We want dropbacks that lead to sacks and potential picks. I think it's a good spot.
Okay, I think the Raiders do make sense because they, like I said, they can generate a pass rush, and that helps too. I'm going to go Kansas City because this game is a game people may want to stack. And like, I get it, but it's a higher total. We want that in terms of like play volume. If they get behind, they'll have to throw, and Jimmy Garoppolo in a negative script is not fun. I don't mind the Bengals again at 36 and hopes they build lead early to force Atlanta to throw, but I need to keep my exposure to both these teams in check because it's basically asking myself, what are the odds that Kansas City or Cincinnati get in front early? Because that generates dropbacks. If they don't get ahead early, they're not going to get score points. So ask myself, what are the odds they get in front early to generate those dropbacks? I think the Raiders make sense because they're more likely to have an early lead. So I don't mind that. Kind of the Chargers, the same thought process of like, okay, what are the odds they get in front? Force a lot of dropbacks for Geno. I like that game and I like Geno, but I should consider the Chargers as well for the reasons listed. And then also the other one I'd mention is Green Bay. Green Bay is $4,500. If I can get there against Taylor Heineke, they generate a good amount of pressure. I think that makes sense too. So it's there's no firm play for me at defense this week.
They're the best value in my model for the week.
Green Bay is?
Yeah.
Well, I'll take that for sure. All right. That is all that we have here for week number 7. Brandon, any final thoughts for you now that we've talked through this slate in full?
I think we covered everything. It's really hard to break down succinctly this slate because there's a lot of like if then sort of things.
Yeah.
But I still want to stack the games that I like most. I think that all of this makes me higher on Chargers Seahawks. And stack them up.
Only final thought for me is Geno. Geno. We need Geno across the board for this week. That's all we got here for week number 7. We'll be back with you once again on Monday to recap all the action and the big takeaways and take our first look at week number 8 over on FanDuel. To get that, plus the Daily ISO and our other Heat Check podcast, make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
On Twitter at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcasts. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your NFL DFS lineups. We'll talk to you once again Monday to wrap it all up. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.